Hello, and welcome to Fearless Authenticity with me, Jeanne Sparrow. This is where we find our biggest sources of success in who we really are. This is meant to be a conversation and maybe some meditations on what it looks and feels like when we use our unique gifts to find our passions, make our dreams come true, and engage with the world in the way that we were truly created to serve. Now, as I always say, I like it to get deep because that's where we find the good stuff, those little golden nuggets. But don't get it twisted. It is about the fun of things, because if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. And as I always like to say, let's be brave, be free, be you, and let's do it together. My guest today is the dating and relationship expert. You have seen her on Good Morning America, Steve Harvey, The Today Show, Kelly Clarkson, ABC, NBC, Fox, all over the place. Steve Harvey even calls her the fairy godmother of dating, which she is. She founded the Smart Dating Academy in 2009 after leaving her corporate life behind. And her clients say, and this is a quote, "It's like going to Harvard Business School, but for dating and relationships." She's a TEDx speaker. She attends more weddings than she can count. She loves love. She's also a proud wife and mother, and I am honored to welcome the one and only Bela Gandhi
Jeanne Sparrow!
Fearless Authenticity Podcast. I love you, Bela Gandhi!
I am so excited to be here and to see you and to do Fearless Authenticity.
You talk about it all the time, even if you don't call it exactly that. But before we get started on this conversation, I want to say thank you for everything you did that I don't know that you realize you did when I first started my own business. So I guess I should tell everybody that you've been a guest on a lot of the shows that I've been on, especially You and Me This Morning on the You. We talked about dating a whole lot and things like that, and giving people advice. And when our show got canceled, you reached out and just said, if you ever need anything, make sure you remember that I'm here. And I did reach out because I was finding my way, deciding if I was going to start my business. And you had already, been doing your thing with Smart Dating Academy. And you gave me some really great advice. You took me to lunch and gave me great advice, all of which I'm sure you will share at some point in time. But one of the main things was knowing my worth and charging my worth. Because you're like, you're not charging enough, Jeanne Sparrow.
Okay.
And the thing is, Bela, I still am learning that lesson. And there was a lot of other stuff in that conversation. But thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for thanking me for something that I don't even remember that I said to you, but I'm glad that you internalized it and that you do know your worth, and that when you know your worth, others respect you for that worth, right? So Godspeed. I'm really proud of everything that you've done since then. And you look amazing. You look happy. You've got dazzle coming through the screen. I'm speechless.
Thank you, my darling. You always dazzle, but let me see that cup again that you just took a little sip out of. Let's show the people.
You sure, girl?
Absolutely, sis.
Can we go there?
This is me. Less fucking attitude, more fucking gratitude. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Lord have mercy.
Okay. So, and I always carry a magic wand next to my desk, right? To cast good spells on everyone. So less fucking attitude, more fucking gratitude. And this is a podcast of love, ultimately. So for those of you that want more love in your life in whatever way, shape, or form that is, maybe from your partner, maybe you want a new partner, maybe you want more love from your friends, from your kids, from your parents, I wish you a year full of more love, and that people see you for your worth and love you for that worth.
Damn, girl. That's how we open up a Fearless Authenticity podcast. Well, so let's start here. When I say the words fearless authenticity to you, what's the first thing that pops into your mind?
Just being yourself. Like, fearless authenticity to me is just the way to be. Is that a good answer?
That's an excellent answer. And here's the thing, I want to dig a little deeper in that with you because, I keep up with you. I've talked with you a whole bunch about this. We covered this because this is one of the most popular topics to cover on any talk show and in any conversation. Like, I bet you never have an end of questions that you get at dinner parties and other things, no matter the status of the people who are around the room. But especially, there's one thing you've always said that stuck with me when it comes to dating is that, and this is something that's so essential to me when it comes to fearless authenticity and the way in which we communicate who we are, is that what people feel inside is what they end up putting out, even when they say something different. Like, you talk about how if somebody doesn't feel great about the size they are, then somehow that will be communicated to the person that they're talking to. Or if they don't believe there's a good guy out there, or a good woman out there for them, or whatever, then that's what ends up coming through, that who we are always shines through, for better or worse.
That's right. I mean, what you focus on grows, right? And it grows internally, and you can brew those dark storm clouds inside of yourself. And then what happens? That's what you project outward, right? Versus if you're focusing on, right, less fucking attitude, more fucking gratitude, right? If you look at the good in your life, and I know people are like, okay, gratitude, gratitude. But I'll tell you what, if you roll your eyes to me and say, yeah, gratitude, it means you're not grateful, right? When you are truly grateful, I will tell you what, gratitude and fear cannot live in the same space. So we are talking about fearless authenticity. And if you find yourself with a lot of dark storm clouds inside of you, right? You need to get into that space of what is good in me? What is good in my life? Because remember, once you start to feel like, you know what? I do have good in me. I have good in my life. You start to feel better. And because gratitude and fear cannot live in the same space, we become more fearless.
I love that. And people feel it, they sense it, and because I do believe that like attracts like. So if you are feeling dark and stormy, you're gonna have the dark and stormy, twisty relationship. We've all been through those phases at some point in time. And that's how it breaks down. But one thing about you were talking about gratitude journals a long time ago, before people actually, that was an actual thing. And how did you get to that, where you kept a journal of the things that you were thankful for all the time and really started to focus? Was that a piece of advice somebody gave you? And how did that happen?
Yeah. My bestie in my own mind is Oprah. And right. And so Oprah on a podcast, right? Oprah, if you're listening to this, we are best friends. You just don't know it yet. But her advice, I listened to an interview, and you can probably pull it up from years ago, where Oprah was just and this is before she was Oprah, right? And this was before The Color Purple. This was before all of that, and how she had always been, shamed for her weight, and she was out running on a track and, trying to beat herself into being thin. And she realized that when she got herself into a good space and she made herself every day write down 3 things that she was grateful for, because she was focused on what hadn't gone right in her life, how big she was, all of the things. And she's like, girl, some days it was hard to come up with 3 things. Some days I was reaching, like, I am grateful for the round blueberries that were in my oatmeal this morning, and not the janky, weird shaped ones. It's like, that's how hard I had to pull for that. But then the story is how the power of gratitude started to change everything in her life. And I was like, well, if that's what Oprah says is the secret, who am I to not try that? And so I will tell you, when you are feeling down, when you are feeling sad, when you are feeling angry, right? Your feelings don't have to define you. Remember, feelings are driven by thoughts. they don't just exist in the ether on their own. They're driven by something that you think. You look in the mirror, you think about yourself. It's that voice inside of you. Oh, you know what? Jeanne looked at me in kind of a weird way. I don't think she likes me. What does that trigger? That triggers a negative feeling, but that's all internal self-talk. So crowding that out with what is good in my life, it makes all the difference. Just try it. I encourage you, if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't know, it's all voodoo, hooey fooey, I'm telling you, just try it.
How did it change for you? What when you first started doing it, did you know how long was it before you actually noticed the change that was happening with the gratitude journal for you?
It didn't take long, right? They say a new habit takes 30 days, right? And I started to notice what was really interesting is it's kind of what Oprah says. When you are accountable to yourself for looking for what's good, what do you start to look for all day long? Shit to write in your gratitude journal and the good stuff, right? So suddenly you start to rewire your brain. Remember, as human beings, we have the same brains we had 200,000 years ago. And those brains are wired for negativity because if we're looking for what's wrong and what's dangerous and what's off kilter, that's how we survived back in the jungles. Today, our brains are still wired for a negativity bias. And so it takes conscious reactivity to get to that positive zone, and making yourself look for what's good is an effort. But when you start to do that, what you focus on grows.
I love this. No wonder you're such an amazing coach. But it wasn't always that way necessarily, right? Because you, like, your path is so interesting to me. And this is something we've not actually talked about other than in kind of in passing, because the main content of the things we've talked about has been your work now. But you really took a roundabout way to get to this. I'm going to call it a dream job. Your dream business. I mean, you were in mergers and acquisitions, which I think is actually really appropriate for the dating world. I'm just going to put it out there.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I have a twisty, windy path to getting to where I am now. But I think the thesis that I would tell you is whatever you do, whatever you study, whatever you first come out doing doesn't have to define you. It's not your end all be all. If you know what your gift is and you're brave enough and fearlessly authentic enough to do it, you can get there too.
So I want to dig a little bit into that path though, because I mean, you worked, you know, did a stint in corporate, Arthur Andersen, like a lot of people of our generation, you know, going straight into that, working for your family's chemical company, getting it sold to a Fortune 500, working for them, and then jumping off that corporate ladder. But through it all, I was reading an article that had interviewed you kind of early on in the Smart Dating Academy years. Thank God for the internet.
Whew,
And
whew.
you talked about how much you loved working in your family business, but that this has been a theme that you were doing this matchmaking and dating coaching and setting up people all the way through. And it started back in college.
Yeah. Okay. So it's crazy. I mean, my first match was my college roommate with a guy that I met in the dorms my freshman year. And as I was like, you're going to marry my roommate. And it took me 2 years to get them to go on that date. But when they did, I'll tell you what, they were engaged 2 years later. They've now been married for 23 years. They live in Glenview. They have 3 children. And he's now a foot and ankle surgeon prominently for some Chicago sports teams. And I'll tell you, and that was my first match. And then I started matching up more of my friends. Girl, I had bad dating patterns. I had my own system. I got myself out of it. I started dating my husband. May 17th, we'll be married 25 years, right? And so I started to teach everybody around me to do that. And to your point about corporate matchmaking, you know, my family was in the business of making Teflon for cookware and bakeware globally. And as manufacturing started to fall in the 90s and everything got shipped over to low-cost labor countries, I would have brands like our clients were cookware and bakeware manufacturers like Calphalon and Wilton and things that you see all over the place. And they were like, what factories in Asia should I be working with, Bella? And so you would sort of I would get to know the personality of the factories in Asia. I was there 5 times a year. And I'm like, you know what? I think this is a good factory for you. And then start to matchmake our corporate clients with vendors in Asia. And I was like, I am just matchmaking all the while. But when you get to know the essence of a person, who they are, what would complement them, what their values are, it's this process that you can deploy in any aspect of your life. So it's crazy.
I'm stunned. I'm absolutely stunned, but it completely makes sense knowing you. Did you always feel like this though, growing up? Did you always have this sense that you had, what puzzle pieces fit together for people? Or was it, like finding your career path and then realizing it later? Because it sounds like you've learned to apply it in a lot of different ways.
That's
and
right.
Use that to shape your business. But when I think a lot of times, and I say this a lot on this podcast, that I believe we're all put here to do something in particular. And we spend most of our lives trying to figure out why. And when we do, and then start doing it intentionally, then there's so much power and punch behind it. But we still impact the world the way that we're supposed to. The thing I find interesting about people, especially who feel like they have a calling, that sometimes they know it, there doesn't seem to be the one pattern to it. Sometimes they've always known it. And then other times they come to realize it and realize they've been doing it all along. What is your experience with this calling for you? Because you definitely got the gift, girl.
It's the latter, not the former of
Really?
what you mentioned. I did not start out intentionally knowing what I wanted to do. Jeanne, I would envy my friends that would be like, I've known since I was 5 years old, I wanted to be a journalist. I've known since I was 8 years old that I wanted to be an ER doc. I was like, I changed my major 4 times last week, right? I was totally that kid. I'm the child of first generation Indian immigrants. And if you all know anything about our culture, we produce professionals. We are doctors, we are lawyers, we are engineers, right? We win spelling bees. That is what we do. And so I was
and do it well.
Right.
And do it well. If you're going to be a stereotype, honey, that's the one you want to be.
That's the one you want to be, right? Exactly. So I was like, ooh, don't like blood, not going to be a doctor. So I didn't fit in anywhere into these rubrics that had been presented to me, right? So I took the least offensive option, which was go to business school, right? That was on the plate for my dad. Like, you can be this, you can just study this, you can study this. And so I just sort of, okay, well, the best job you can get when you come out with a finance degree and a German degree is, well, I'm going to go work at Arthur Andersen. And I realized there, year 1 in management consulting, I was not suited for that work. I was like a flower that had been put in a dark vacuum. I was like wilted, sad, and for a year, I finally kind of figured my way around how to survive there. And that's when my dad was like, you're bored. Why don't you maybe think about utilizing that useless German degree that I paid for? Why don't you take our Teflon business and why don't you bring it to Europe? And I thought, I don't know a damn thing about chemistry, but he said something to me that changed the course of my life. We were on our patio deck back in Glenview, and I said to him, Dad, I took one class of chemistry in high school. My dad's a chemical engineer, and I was not that good at it. What can I do for you? Like, yeah, I speak German, but then what? And he looked at me and he's like, you are only limited to your own ambition. Don't ask me that question again. And he turned around and he walked off the deck. And I was like,
I raised you better than this. Don't ask me that again. Damn.
I was like, what does that mean? I was like, I couldn't wrap my head around it. You're only limited to your own ambition. What does that mean? You can do whatever you want. That's your only limit. And I thought, okay, well, it took me all of 7 days to tender my resignation at Arthur Andersen. And I went into that company owned by my dad. And I'll tell you what, when you start out at a company, a manufacturing company, scrappy, looks like a coal mine in the middle of Logan Square, back in 1994, when Logan Square was not what it is today. Okay. Right.
Wild, Wild West over here.
Dodgy as all get out.
Sketch.
And it was like, yeah, oh, totally. And when you start out as the daughter of the owner, if you start a job anywhere else, you start out at zero, right? People are willing to talk to you. They're like, okay, let's see who you are. When you start out with the same last name as the owner, you start out at -100. And when you're a female, -200. So crawling out of that hole in and of itself was a challenge that I never understood. They're like, oh, here's the princess. Let's see what she's going to do. And I was the first one there in the morning. I turned the lights on. I was the last one there. I turned the lights out. For years, it took that long for them to go, all right, we respect you.
Wow.
Rough.
Ooh.
Being a young woman of color back in the 90s in the manufacturing world. I know how to ride. I know how to drive a forklift. I'm like, if these guys can do it and load skids on a pallet, I'm in. Show me how to do this. They're like, you're crazy. I was like, you don't know the extent of the crazy.
Sis. And you're all of what, 5'5"? No disrespect to smaller people.
5'2.5".
See?
Hold on. If I do this, I'm 5'3". Bring back the claw.
Yep. Oh, and that bump thing.
The claw and the puppy ears that we all had in the 80s, right? Like a little of this, a little of that. Yeah. No. Yeah. I am a small person.
But you got a big spirit, and God bless it. That's what you needed to get through that situation. Do you think that experience is what made you able to transition from that corporate life? Because you ended up, being part of the transition when the company was built. You went and moved with the company that bought your dad's company.
Sure did.
And helped in that transition and was a leader in that sort of situation. Do you think that, or how do you think that foundation of the turning the lights on and off, driving that forklift, impacted how you worked later?
It was everything. It's such a good question. If I had not jumped off into, if I would have, in a sense, taken the safe route, like I'm going to stay at Arthur Andersen and I'm going to work 13 years, I'm going to be a partner. And I knew, no, that I gotta go. And if I had not experienced the role of that, like climbing from -200 to 0, driving the forklift, all of those survival skills, ultimately, right? Harassment, you name it, been there, done it. And yet the company was my responsibility, but it built super strong skills at a very young age, right? I mean, I was thrust into leadership at 23 and traveling to 5 continents a year. And that was 100% responsible for my U-turn into entrepreneurship because I don't know any differently. I don't know any differently. And well, it's funny when I thought about becoming a matchmaker, I thought, I'm going to go and get this. And I'll say the name. I made a pretty resume and I had all this great collateral. I have run a Fortune 100 division. I was promoted, sold a company, tried to get a job at a local dating service to cut my teeth, could not get past the door. Hand brought in my resume with all of these, wearing the thing, the product, they're like looking the part, to take a 23-year-old's job, essentially, because I wanted to learn, because that's how I am. Like, I want to learn it from the ground up. The receptionist, I said, could I meet with the general manager? And they're like, just leave your resume. If someone's interested, they'll call you back. Some people from that dating service now work for our company.
Whoo, that must taste sweet.
It was what they tell me, because I was willing to do it. I'm like, let me go. I'm going to go work there. And I want to see, maybe I love the job there. And they're all like, this is karma. You were supposed to do your company. It was karma that they said no, because maybe you'd still be there.
That, and then that goes right back to what your dad said.
You're only limited to your own ambition. And had I not learned how to drive that forklift and do all of those things, I don't think I would have had the guts to say, well, if I can't get a job doing what I want to do and it doesn't exist, I guess I'll have to create it.
Mm-hmm. And here you are, killing it.
13 years later.
Killing it, and all the weddings you go to, and the babies that you have helped to bring into the world, and the love that you've been spreading, and not only with your clients but also with the world. Like, you've really done, I mean, you are one of our favorite guests to have on, because you always brought the spark, and you always made me go, I'm doing this dating thing all wrong. I need to just go on and hire Bella.
Right?
I just need to go on and do it. And Missy was like, you're getting the advice for free. Just listen to her next time. Right. And the two of you in my ear, because she's a low-key yenta herself. And then I've got, the dating advice on one side. Those were some interesting years. That's all.
Those were some interesting, seems like 5 minutes ago.
Right. And look at how far we've come. And the other thing that I find interesting about this is that it was a long incubation period between when you thought about this as a career and when you actually took the leap. How long was that? How long did that take for you? And what was it that happened in that gap that made you finally jump into it?
Oh, I got goosebumps with that question. Those are what I call the dark years, from 2006 to 2009. So we were bought by this multinational called AkzoNobel, and they were great. And, at a certain point, they said, we want to promote you and move you to Nashville, because that's what happens in corporations, I guess. When you do a good job, they're like, okay, now you're an employee. We want you to run a bigger facility. Now I had a 2-year-old and a house, and I'm like, nah, I'm going to go off and do something else. And so I decided it was time to leave. And I left with no plan. And I thought it'll just come to me, because things just happen, right? I met Arthur Andersen, my dad's opportunity comes along. And it was the first time where I saw, man, if you don't have a plan, it doesn't just come to you. It was like a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. And it started to get harder. And I started to realize how much of my self-worth as a young 30s person was in my career, was in my paycheck. When people would ask me, what do you do? It was hard to answer. And I was a mom, right? And anybody will say, okay, you're a mom. That's amazing. I'm like, but for me, that professional pie piece, I realized poignantly was incredibly important to me. And it took me, I would probably say, I think I went through some dark, sad, depressed times until I knew I wanted to do this dating thing, but it was fear. It was fear of failure. It was fear of, I had this big career. What are people going to say? You want to become a dating coach and a matchmaker, and you were a global vice president and blah. And I had all the shit in our heads that we all say to ourselves that do what? Shackle you in place. And I stayed shackled, you guys, for 3 years, 36 months. What is that? 156 weeks doing nothing, worrying about what I thought other people would think if it didn't go well. And one day I stumbled across an article, like we do when the good Lord is like, okay, and now you're ready. And now I'm done messing with you. And the article was about failure versus regret. And I thought, what is this? So I'm thumbing through it, and I stopped and I pictured two scenarios in my head. And I'm like, okay, I want to start a dating company. What's the failure scenario? So I'm looking at my little daughter who's toddling around. I'm like, I've got 4 grandkids. I'm serving them country time lemonade. I'm sitting on a porch. And I'm telling them the story of my life. I'm 85 years old. And the story of failure is, y'all, I started this dating company, and what a debacle that was. It ended up so badly. And I was met like, oh, we were sued. But here's what happened after that. Here's where it led me. But I did it. I was like, okay, that's kind of a sucky story, but all right. Then I went to the regret story. And here's where it got good. And I had to look at these 8 little eyeballs, these 4 little people, and tell them, you know what? Don't do what I did. Don't be afraid of starting something, because someday when you're sitting in this rocking chair looking at your grandkids, you're going to say, coulda, woulda, shoulda. I wish I would have done that. What did I do with my time? And I think about it every day. And I was like, oof, that is the way worse story. That day, I decided I was going to do this. And a month later, I went to a conference and we were in business. Failure versus regret. Play the long game in your mind, people.
And and this has been a theme lately with a lot of the people I've been talking about how hard it is, because we all talk about the long game. We all have strategies for the short game, and we always say, oh, well, the short game just plays into the long game and blah, 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 but really playing the long game and staying committed to it and understanding where you eventually want to get to and all the things that it takes to get there, that kind of commitment is a very different thing. And it's a very different kind of vision that many of us, I would say most of us culture, especially, I don't know if it's generationally for Gen X exclusively, but I do think we have some of that because we got some of that cynicism going on. But that we are not trained to think that way. We're trained to think about the short-term rewards, not about the long-term gains. And where does that commitment come from to be able to commit to the long game? And even better, where does the vision happen? How do we tap into that? Because even though I feel like I found mine, I have no idea. Well, I have a little idea, but not a big idea of how to tell people to do that for themselves.
Man, it's a great question. And I think you're so right. And I don't even know, Jeanne, if it's limited to Gen X. I think it's getting progressively worse. I have 2 teenagers, right? 14 and 18. And talk about a culture and a milieu of instant gratification, right? Everything is on demand. Everything is on their phones. They can watch things. They are never bored because they don't need to play. They don't even need to play the short game, right? Much less the long game. And I think that as Gen Xers, we have the ability to go, yeah, I don't play that long game that well. And again, what does this go back to? It goes back to that primitive brain that we have 200,000 years ago. What did we need to do? We needed to survive till this evening. And we needed to survive until tomorrow or the next harvest. We didn't have shelter and abundant food, right? We were like hunters and gatherers. What's going to happen? What, right foot, left foot? We're not good at playing the long game. And you're raising, I think, an incredibly insightful point for those of you that are listening. It's not your fault if you don't play the long game. We're not wired to play the long game. Hell, at the year 1900, the average age of mortality was 30. We're not wired to be 70, 80, and 90 years old, right? So to your point, it is an effort. It is a set of systems that you have to create to play the long game. I am right now reading and listening to Atomic Habits. Unbelievable book. James Clear, right? Why we don't get what we want, why our habits are everything, what we need to do to set ourselves up to get what we want, and how it starts with our identity. And then it starts with the systems that we create to create the outcomes that we want. And we don't do any of it naturally.
You know, I wrote that down because I think that's essential, because it's something I'm learning that I'm not great at as a business owner. Like, I'm really good working within systems, but I'm not great at designing them, because I know the outcome I want and I can see so many paths to it. It's hard. I need a team member, and I finally found that person who's great at operations, who can like corral me in, because and you know what, and I even have seen the parallel, and it's interesting. And I wonder if the book talks about this. I've seen the parallels in my work life when I was working with teams, and how there were people, like when you're an on-air talent reporter, whatever, and you have producers, they're the people that set up the systems that you can work in. And when you're without that, you're like a kite that doesn't have a string. You're just out there flapping around. You get stuck in a tree and you're like, I'm going somewhere, but you're not really going anywhere.
No, you're right. And that's a great analogy, right? It's just knowing I'm not good at creating systems, and therefore I'm going to be better at creating systems that work for me, right? Because ultimately we can hire those things out as business people. I'm not great at finance, so I'm going to bring on a good finance person. But ultimately, to create the life you love, you have to create the identity of the person you want to be. I am a successful business owner who is financially competent, a good friend, a good mother, right? You have to create those identities to create the systems. And what becomes so interesting that I'm learning is when you create the systems to propel you, you don't even have to worry so much about the goals and the outcomes. Because if you just do the thing, the outcome will happen. But we all start out, I want to lose 20 pounds. Okay. How are you going to get there? It's the system that fails us. It's the lack of systems.
Bella, okay, here's what's weird about what you just said. My therapist just said that to me this morning. You just got to do the thing. Like, there's one big thing that I've been working on lately with her. And she was just like, Jeanne, here's the connection between what you want and what you're trying to do. And she was like, and she went through this whole analogy thing. But like, here's the thing that's weird. Okay. And so this is a sidebar just about me. I'm sure that you've gotten to these moments with your clients, but this is your genius. And I want to highlight it, because sometimes I know for me, I need to hear something 3 times before I act on it.
Okay.
The first time
that's your system.
Yep. So the first time I hear it, I go, oh yeah, that's a great idea. The second time I hear it, I'm like, okay, God, I heard you the first time. Thanks for the reminder. And the third time, it's the kick in the pants. But what's wild is the way these synchronicities, kind of link up. And when you talk about someone like you, who is tapped into the way you serve and help other people, like, it feels like magic. And that's the Bela Gandhi effect.
Man. Oh, it's, when you get into that zone where you feel like, oh, that's the thing. I just have to do that thing, and I have to do it again. And you start to do it, and you start to do it every day, because that is who you want to become. Right? It's like, if you say to yourself, you're talking about business, right? And hiring and creating systems. If you say, I am a successful business owner with great systems, with everything you're going to do, is this what a successful business owner with good systems does?
It's
probably 99% of the stuff that we do is not consistent with what a successful business owner with good systems does. And you're like, okay, if that's my identity, is this action going to get me closer to or further from that goal? And that's doing the thing.
sis. Okay, so I did not invite you on the podcast to coach me, but thank you. I appreciate it. You can't help yourself. You cannot help yourself. Um,
That is great praise. And I feel it. Thank you.
and I love it because you just do it so naturally and beautifully. What I mean, I think you've already kind of talked about one of your biggest challenges when you talk about those dark years. But as challenges come up for you, setbacks, maybe even failures, what are your tactics, habits, bounce backs that you do? Even maybe even if it's just a discouraging moment, like something isn't coming together for a client that you're really rooting for. Um, what's because that's a habit of success too, I think, is the bounce back.
Yeah. I asked myself one question. What is the meaning in the mess? What am I supposed to take from this? What's the challenge? What's the opportunity? Because if you sit there and you play the victim, which is really easy to do, right? When we have setbacks, when somebody says no, when something doesn't work, when we don't hit our sales numbers, when that Tinder person that you like says, yeah, I don't want to see you again. It's like, what do you do at that point? It's like, okay, what, right? What's the opportunity in this? The opportunity is that wasn't the right lid to my pot. That's okay that he said no, because I know love is out there for me and I just have to keep dating until I find it. And if you put a product out there and people don't come, that doesn't mean you're a failure or your product is a failure. It means how do I better serve my audience?
That is a question I tell my clients all the time, verbatim. Who are they? What do they care about? And how can I serve them? Oh my God, Bella, why are you in here? Why are you all in my brain?
You're my soulmate.
Okay, apparently. I love that though. I mean, because we all are trying to make meaning out of all the stuff that we do anyway. And so, yeah, why not that too?
Why not that too? And that's really the question is never, it's like that graph. And many of you have probably seen this, what we think success is, which is a straight line. But when you actually when you zoom in on it, it's like a zigzaggy, biggly, loopily line that goes all over the place. And we all think it's easy for everybody else. And yet, my mom gives me great advice. And she said, honey, the Buddhists say life is a struggle. And when you accept that, all of these things become easy because you're like, well, life is a struggle. So today, this is my struggle. How am I going to solve this struggle? But when you think it's all supposed to be easy and it's easy for everybody else and you get all gnarly in your own brain, right? It's like, no, everybody's life is a struggle and this is mine. It's like, okay, if everybody's got a backpack, I guess I got to carry my backpack too.
And it's that simple.
It's that simple, right? It's all of our success is right there in between our temples. And so much of it is just reframing the way we're thinking about things, right? If you're like, oh, that sucked. Everyone hates me. I'm a failure. You're going to get in bed into fetal position, crawl in there. Now, the question is, you're going to stay there for an hour? You're going to stay there for a month, a year, or a decade? It's okay to be there. It's okay to feel the feelings and be sad and be angry and cry. But then can you find the meaning in that mess? And that's how you start to get out of it.
Oh, So with that, I have a couple of last questions I ask of everyone. The penultimate question is, what is your proudest achievement and what do you still dream of doing? So where you been and where you're going, basically.
My proudest achievement is having a loving family. I have a great husband who is my anchor, who has been an amazing partner for me in life that enabled me to start this business and create this life I love and is my biggest cheerleader. So I think I'm proudest of having a family, having a business, and kind of feeling like an octopus where I feel like I can keep all these plates spinning and they're doing okay, right? So I've got kind of the pie, most of the pie pieces moving at the same time in the direction I want to. But, I say that balance in life is really important to me. And balance doesn't mean having it all. It means having it all maybe some days, because some days your kids are going to take over. Someday your business is going to take over. Someday your aging parents are going to take over. Some days your husband's going to need emergency arm surgery, which he does on Monday. It's sitting back and saying, I have all the pieces that I want and I'm proud of it. Am I perfect? Hell no. But you know what? It's pretty good.
I like it. And what do you still dream of doing?
I dream of scaling my business to be able to help more people. Right now, we're boutique and we help people that are kind of in the 1% at this point that really want to get out there and find love. And my dream is to create more products that we can help people with, starting as teenagers into their early 20s, so that we can put an impact, not only bring more love into the world, but also reduce the toxicity of bad relationships and the energy that brings.
Yeah, because the less stuff we have to heal from, the better off we'll all probably be if we, because sometimes that stuff is necessary to get through it, to get to where you want to be. But if you get that out of the way, yeah, and have good habits to begin with. Look at you, Bella. All right, my last question. When do you feel like you are at your best, truest, most authentic expression of yourself?
I work on trying to be that person every day. I think that it's so important. It's kind of the definition of integrity, right? Right? To be who you are at all times. And it's funny, having done so much media, like I know you have too, when people meet you in person, one of the greatest compliments they'll give you after listening to you on a show or your podcast or Instagram, and they're like, you're exactly like you are on your show. I'm like, why would I be anything different?
Some people are.
Some people are. And I don't know. I guess I'm not smart enough to have figured out how you can create a facade to be something that you're not, because I'm like, all right, here's who I am. And if you don't like it, you don't have to listen. You can go somewhere else. And I think at a certain point, it's about knowing that you're not going to be everybody's flavor. You're not going to be everybody's tempo. You might, if somebody's super shy, you can turn down the volume on your loud, right? Just to not overwhelm them. But that doesn't mean you're being inauthentic. It just means you're being considerate of them and, maybe turning down the big, as I call it. But other than that, just be you. Life gets so much easier to just be yourself, because then you have integrity all the time. You're not trying to make everybody in the world like you, because at a certain point you have no control over that. The only control you have is being who you are. Be the best version of who you are. Be kind. It doesn't mean, well, today I'm feeling a little snarky, so I'm going to go out and bring out the bitch because that's who I am. No, you need to put her in the box, right? Because that's not nice. And having that self-awareness to say, who do I want to be, coming from a place of love with others. Go talk to your therapist. Get that, unleash all of that toxicity on the people that are there to help you with that. Not even your friends. They're not going to want that all the time, right? Give it help, get the help you need to stay the best version of yourself, and then put that out there, because you'll feel a lot better about you and you'll get a lot better feedback.
And I love that you work on it every day, because I think that's really what this is. It's a journey
every
to
day.
Become that person every single day. Bela Gandhi, it is always a pleasure talking to you. It is an honor to hear your story on this podcast. Thank you so much for making time for me today. I really, really, really appreciate you.
If you could all see my arms, they're filled with goosebumps right now. I love this conversation so much. You are a deeply authentic authentic, badass, kinder than kind, amazing human being, Jeanne Sparrow. And thank you. It's been an honor to chat with you and thank you for being interested in my story.
Oh my God, how could I not be? Love you, girl. Love you, love you, love you.
Love you more.
You know, Bela Gandhi will get you gathered in the funniest, most honest and pointed way, which I guess is an occupational hazard or really just makes her great at her job. Here are a few things that I want to highlight from our conversation about authenticity and action that I absolutely loved. The connection between feelings and thoughts, and how our feelings are actually driven by the things we think, and to bounce back from that, because we all get stuck in negative loops of thinking that affect how we feel. And the fact that she asks herself that one question: what's the meaning in the mess? What are we supposed to take from things? What's the challenge? What's the opportunity? But how we are determining how we feel by what we think. And I think that's so important, because sometimes we feel like we're out of control. And then how we can change streams whenever we want, that what we do or study first doesn't have to define us. She took a really big risk in her life and made some huge shifts, and realized that if she wanted to do the business that has now gotten her so much success, the thing that was stopping her was the fear of failure and what other people thought of it. And when we make the choice, and when we decide it's in our power to make that choice between failure and regret, because which one are you going to want to live with? I agree. I would much rather live with knowing I tried and I gave it my best, than regretting and always wondering what if. And then how being ourselves is work and takes work every day. The definition of integrity is being who you are at all times, and understanding who that is and working toward it. And also accepting that you're not going to be everybody's flavor, that the only control you have is just being that best version of yourself and letting the rest go. That's always my lesson. Always. So thank you, Bela, for reminding me of it. And thank you for sharing and being our guest today. I also want to thank you, our listeners, for your support. Thank you to my Fearless Authenticity production team for making this pod happen. Please follow me at JM Sparrow on social. Also, like, rate, review, download, subscribe, and share wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube for the video version. Also, send us your comments and questions. We want to know what's on your mind, and we love hearing from you. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again soon for Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow.